All right, let's try something a little different. What if we just picked one day, totally at random, from the calendar? Let's say February 19th. It turns out that by looking at the mathematicians who were born or died on this single day, we can uncover this incredible hidden story about what science is really all about. It's the human story. So, what can one single day really tell us? It's a pretty cool question, right? We usually think of math as this, clean, logical thing, all numbers and formulas. But nope, behind every single one of those theorems, there are people. Real people with all their messy struggles, their quirks, and their amazing, surprising connections to our world. February 19th, that's our key to unlocking it all.
And our first stop on this journey, well, it shows us that progress, especially in a field like mathematics, doesn't come cheap. For some, the price of a proof was just immense.
So let's meet our first mathematician, Alexander Korkin, born on February 19th, 1837. Now, before he could even dream of numbers and equations, he had to deal with something way more fundamental. He wasn't free. He was born a serf, which meant he and his family were literally the legal property of the province they lived in. I mean, just try to wrap your head around the kind of determination this took. First, his family had to scrape together enough money to buy his freedom from the province, just so he could go to high school. But it doesn't stop there. After he somehow gets through university, guess what? He had to pay all over again to be officially freed so he could start his teaching career. He had to purchase his own liberty twice, just for the right to chase an idea.
And you gotta remember, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. The whole system was a powder keg. You've got the czar up top debating the politics of ending serfdom. Maybe, eventually. But down on the ground, you have people like Korkin, who couldn't wait. He was living that struggle, fighting for his own freedom day in and day out.
And the thing is, Korkin's story, it's not a one-off. It's this dark, recurring theme throughout the history of science, and February 19th shows us that. On this same day, we mark the deaths of others who faced these insane battles. You've got Erich Rothe, a decorated World War I veteran, fired from his university in 1935. Why? Simply for being Jewish. Then there's Wilhelm Specht, who was told, "No, you can't have this job," by the Nazi ministry because he dared to have an anti-Nazi stance. It just shows you, this fight for the freedom to think, it's a battle that's been fought over and over again. Okay, so we've seen how people had to fight against these huge external forces. But sometimes the biggest obstacle isn't a government or a social system. Sometimes it's just silence. It's having a brilliant idea that nobody else gets or even cares about. And that brings us to this guy, Axel Thue, another February 19th birthday. His whole philosophy was, well, it was wild. He basically believed that the more useless a piece of math was, the more important it was. He was all about doing math just for the sheer beauty of it, with zero thought about whether it could ever be used for, anything. So what was this supposedly useless work? Something called Combinatorics on words. Essentially, he was just playing around with strings of symbols, kind of like abracadabra, and looking for hidden patterns. He was asking these really abstract questions that, to everyone else at the time, must have sounded completely pointless, like a fun little brain teaser and nothing more. And here is where the story gets so cool. For decades, Thue's work was basically forgotten, a dusty little footnote in a math journal. But then, computers happened. The whole digital world exploded into being. And guess what they needed? They needed a way to understand patterns and strings of symbols. All of a sudden, Thue's useless little puzzles weren't so useless anymore. They were the absolute foundation for theoretical computer science, for modern coding, for everything you're using to watch this right now. So yeah, an idea that everybody just shrugged at, that seemed totally pointless, ended up being the bedrock of our entire digital lives. It's just an incredible reminder, isn't it? You never know which useless idea today is going to completely change the world tomorrow. But it's not all about these grand theories and historical struggles. These mathematicians, they weren't just brains in a jar. They were people. They were teachers, they were mentors, they had personalities, They were the ones who made math feel alive. All right, let's talk about Edmund Hlawka. He passed away on this day back in 2009. And if you read what his students said about him, it's amazing. They said he could take the most boring, tedious parts of calculus and actually make them fun. He had this great sense of humor, and he taught in a way that made you enjoy the process, not just cram for a test. And he was a bit of a character, too. Get this. He used to give his lectures completely from memory. No notes. Well, almost no notes. Sometimes he'd scribble a key number for an example on the back of his streetcar ticket. And there's this great story where he had to stop class mid-lecture and tell everyone, with a big grin, that he couldn't go on because the ticket conductor had punched a hole right through his number. You just gotta love that.
And it's funny because Hlawka's teaching style was the polar opposite of Alexander Korkin, the guy we met at the beginning. Remember him? Hlawka was all spontaneous and funny. Korkin, on the other hand, was super meticulous. He dictated every single word so his students could write down perfect notes, going through every little detail. Totally different approaches, right? But both were clearly amazing and effective teachers.
And then you've got this other fella, Endre Kertész. Long before he was a big shot professor, everyone in his town knew him as Bondi. And what did Bondi do? He was a youth leader, the guy organizing football matches, Bible trivia, folk songs, you name it. It's a great little reminder that the skills that make a great mathematician, like logic and leadership and organization, they don't just live in a classroom.
Okay, so let's step back for a second and pull all these threads together. We've been jumping all over history, all connected by this one day. So what's the big picture? What does it all really mean?
Well, what we've seen are these different faces of mathematics, all showing up on February 19th. You have the survivor, people like Korkin and Rothe, who had to fight tooth and nail just to do their work. You've got the visionary, like Thue, with his useless ideas that ended up changing everything. Then you've got the teacher, people like Hlawka and Kertész, who inspired the next generation. And, of course, the bridge builder, the ones who take all that abstract stuff and turn it into something we can all actually use. When you put it all together, the takeaway is, well, it's pretty powerful. Math isn't this cold, clean world of facts and figures. No way. It's a human story. It's messy, it's passionate, it's full of struggle and crazy breakthroughs and people you'll never forget. And that really leaves us with one final question, doesn't it? We did all of this with just one day, February 19th. It makes you think, what stories are hiding in today's date? What incredible tales of struggle and genius are just sitting there, waiting for someone to look?